Welcome, everybody. We will get started in just a few moments. Good afternoon. My name is Colleen Stovall, and I'm the Director of Programs and Events for AIA Miami, and I'd like to welcome you to the 13th in a series of town hall meetings. First, here are just a few of the events that AIA Miami and their sister organization, the Miami Center for Architecture and Design, have coming up in the next month or so. July 3rd is the application deadline for the Christopher Kelly Leadership Program. Please visit the website for rules and the application. It's a valuable program that prepares architects to be leaders of tomorrow. On July 6th, we kick off our AIM Summer Camp, which is online this year for kids 8 to 16. The camp is sold out, but we're really looking forward to 2 weeks of Minecraft, architecture, and fun. July 8th will be Town Hall 14, and the conversation will be educating architects. The professors speak out. July 10th is the second in a series of conversations about urban redesign post-COVID, and the topic will be equity. July 17th will be the third in the series, and the discussion centers on urban parks and public spaces. July 17th is also the first deadline for the AIA Miami Design Awards. Information is on the website for that as well. July 23rd is our book talk with Jose Gelabert Navia on his lovely book about Cuba. August 21st is the last urban redesign in this series, and it will cover mobility. There are more events being added to the calendar every day, so please visit www.aiamiami.org to check them out. And also let us know if you have ideas for town hall meetings or other special events. Just a few light housekeeping things before we begin. There's going to be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please feel free to submit your questions to everyone at any time via the chat feature on Zoom, and we will answer them towards the end of the town hall. I'd like to ask you to continue to mute yourselves and keep your video turned off, which saves us on bandwidth and gives us a smoother presentation. And if you forget, I'm going to mute you. This meeting will be recorded and will be available to view on the AIA Miami website after Friday, July 3rd. And now I'd like to introduce AIA Florida board member, and who is also running for president-elect of AIA Florida. She's a fellow of the AIA and principal at MCHarry and Associates, Lourdes Solera.
Thank you, Colleen. Can everybody hear me, I hope? Welcome to our Why the Fellowship program. This session, I will talk a little bit about the process, how it works, the deadlines or lack thereof actually at the moment. And we have 3 panelists with us today that will share their experiences. We have Soto, president at Ferguson, Glasgow, Schuster. We have Marilys Nepomechie, who is Associate Dean of Faculty and Programs at Florida International University, and visiting us all the way from the southwest of Florida, Joyce Owens, who is Principal at Architecture, Joyce Owens, LLC. All 3 of them are fellows of the College of Fellows, and they each actually have a different objective that they did. And so let me see now if this works. Marilys, Colleen, does this work? Yes, no, maybe? Can you guys see my screen? Somebody say yes, no, maybe? Do I have the right screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, do you see the big screen or the little screen? Because I have 2 screens, so now, of course, it's not cooperating.
I see both.
Okay, well.
I see the little screen. You need to share it.
Oh.
I know. Let me see how this works. Let me see if I can make this. Technology is not. Aha, here we go. I found the right one. So now, does everybody see it? Perfect.
Fabulous.
All right.
That's good.
Perfect. Thank you. So why the fellowship? Usually, I'll start with the housekeeping. Usually, submittals are October. However, they have been delayed, and we will not know what the dates are until after July 7th. So the 2021 schedule has not been set. Traditionally, you submitted in the middle of October, and by February, at the latest middle, you knew whether you had been elevated or not. So I'm going to assume that the notification will take place 4 months after whatever schedule we have. So hopefully we'll know by next week what the schedule is. So again, housekeepings, there are about 7 jurors, and they each have to divide all the submissions, and they can range from 120 to 200 submissions, give or take, or even more. You cannot be reviewed from candidates that are from your own area. The idea is that the jurors don't know you, and therefore are judging you on your merits, not on whether they know you. And so each juror then presents what is specific about your submission and why they think what you have claimed works or not, and then obviously answers any questions. The jurors actually look at all of the submittals, so it's not like they only look at a portion, but they are only responsible to be intimately familiar with that package for only about 1/7 of them. And obviously the candidates are presented alphabetically, so there's no choices, and then you'll discuss it for 10 or 12 minutes. And in fact, what they're really looking for is, since they have such short time to review it, you want to be clear and concise. You want to show the results. You don't want to just write a whole bunch of stuff and it takes 50 pages to get to it. They only, as I said, of the 7 jurors, only 6 actually vote, and 1 usually sits out because they're from your region or your firm or the presenters. You don't have to have a unanimous for it to be elevated. You only need 4. If there's for some reason a tie or those kind of things, they wait till the end, and they have no minimum number. AIA has never had a minimum or maximum number of people they can elevate per year. So the jury is really looking for how have you been recognized, and they want to see that you've been recognized beyond your circle, beyond your sphere, which is what we normally call what's the ripple effect. You have an effect here, but how far did that ripple go beyond your boundaries, and what was that effect, and how long has that effect been going? Are you active in the AIA? Obviously, you don't necessarily have to have been the president if you're going for design, but they want to know that you support the AIA, because this is the second highest honor that the AIA can give you for it. So it's not just little letters after your name, but you really support the institute. And so they're looking for a distinguished body of work. Have you published anything? Have you gotten any type of awards? And all awards count. Did you have an impact on other professions, depending on what your objective is? Do you provide lecture series or present at the universities? How were you involved at the national level? How wide are your publications? Are you in juries? Do you speak in seminars? Or there's a whole plethora of things that they like to see. It doesn't mean that if you don't have one of them, you won't get it. It just means you have to sort of look at everything you've done, and you'd be surprised how many of you have a lot of these things and you just never thought of it that way. Particularly if you're led the institute, which is the objective, they want to know what your leadership positions have been, whether it's at the local level. Again, they want to know things beyond the local level. You want to sort of be involved beyond the local, and what is the impact. This is the basic composition of the submission. You have a sponsor letter, and I cannot stress enough how important a sponsor is. Who you pick as your sponsor really helps your whole process. They are your best advocate, your best critique. They're the ones who keep you on target, who can honestly tell you you're missing this or this looks great. And that's the first thing the jurors will read. So you want to make sure that that sponsor you have picked is somebody that knows you well, not just somebody that you think looks good in your application that you met or know, you know, in one way or another. Then this next section is a summary. It's a summary of everything you've done. Then they ask in section 2 to sort of highlight, you know, take that summary and kind of expand on it and talk about your volunteer, your presentations. And then they have a section they call the exhibits list, which is really if you're taking 10 of those items, 10 of those achievements you've done, and really tell more about it, present it in a more depth manner. And then obviously the last thing they get is the references. And then the references are also very important. Your first year, you need 7 references. And we're all hoping we get it the first year so you don't have to deal with this the second time. If you submit 2 and 3 times, then they have to add extra references. Again, the references are just as important as your sponsor. It has nothing to do with what the person's last name is or how well known they are, but how well they can support that what you say are your achievements. That individual is directly related. They really know that you've accomplished, so they're supporting your statement. And so of the 7 that you need, 5 of them must be AIA members. The other 2 do not need to be AIA members. If let's say, for example, if you have a client that you have a very strong relationship with, then you would perhaps use them, or they can all be 7 architects. The sponsor must be an AIA in good standing. And what does that mean? Is that they've paid their dues and they have everything good. It does not have to be a fellow of the AIA. That is a myth that sometimes is spread out and people think they must be a fellow. They just have to be a member of the AIA. And as I said earlier, they're your best and worst critic, someone that knows you well. And you want a sponsor that'll help you. A sponsor may have more than one candidate, and sometimes it happens, but you want to pick one that really supports what you did and knows what you did very well. There's 5 categories, and they call them objects that you can pick. And I would argue that most of us have a variety of these. So some people sometimes have a hard time picking which one they want. And you kind of want to pick the one that you have the most items or you have the strongest relationship with, or the most evidence, so to speak. So the first one is design, and that is related to design, any type of design, urban design, preservation. They want to make sure that the exhibits portion, which is your 10 different projects, you were the person responsible for that design. They don't judge on the design. They're really looking for what recognition those projects got, what awards and articles were written about it. The second object, which is one of the more, that has the more number of people elevated to it, is education, literature, research, or practice. And so obviously in terms of practice, how did you elevate the work of your firm? How did you mentor? How did you advance the profession? Obviously education, as an educator, you know, how did you impact student work, impact even the profession? So there's a variety of ways to, and if you do research, I mean, that's sort of very simple and clear. So object 2 tends to have one that it's kind of the bucket that picks most of what people do simply because of the nature of what is this. Object 1 and 2 are usually the ones with the larger number of fellows submitted. Object 3 is led the institute or led a related organization. And this really relates to those of us who are very involved with the AIA and you know, have gone over and above just being a member, or even for that matter, just being the president. It wasn't enough to just be the president of the chapter. You have to have done more than that. And so just being on the organization, whether it's AIA, most of the people that get this one is through the institute, although there are others who have related organizations. And, what did you do with that time there? And so they want to see that there's results, that there's that impact. The fourth one is advancement of living standards. And this one's always the one that a lot of people don't quite know how to tag. And it really relates to, again, we can't all be pigeonholed in a specific box. So again, if you work for the government or an organization that you helped, the profession and the living standards, and they have samples usually that you can look at as a model, so to speak. How are you making things better for the architects beyond just sort of the practice portion? And then object 5 is, again, we don't all fall in the same categories, alternate career or volunteer service. So this is the people who get this is people who really have made an impact in ways that are not the typical, they're the professor or the practitioner, but in fact are expanding the role of what an architect is, how the role of architecture is really about improving. And it's not that you do a lot of volunteer service, but that volunteer service has really a level of impact to the society. And to boil it down, the submission of fellowship is really about you. It is a story. It is not a RFQ. I like to tell this to people. This is not a marketing package. It is not an RFQ. It is a story about, it's not an article in a magazine either. It's an article about you. Not necessarily that you need to know everything from day one, but who you are, what you've accomplished, when did this happen, why is it significant, and how did it benefit the profession? And ultimately, you got to prove it. You got to have the backup, the documentation to what you're saying you've accomplished. And the College of Fellows is really the highest honor that the AIA, besides the Gold Award, can give to a member. Only 3% of our members are elevated. So it's really elevating the profession in terms of the public, and it's the elevation of the individual. But ultimately, once you join the College of Fellows, it really has a goal, and the goal is to, promote the institute, promote the advance of the profession, and ultimately to mentor young architects to go up, improve their professional success, their service to society. And so the College of Fellows is very important to the AIA because it really is about sharing what we can do together and as individuals to reach that. If you go onto their AIA.org website, they have all kinds of questions that really help to guide what you're going to do. They have a whole series of seminars you can take, and one of the most important things that you can find on that website is examples. Every year the juries is asked to pick about 3 or so per objective that they put on the website to help people, give them an idea as to what exactly is sort of the best approach to your submittal. I am the College of Fellow representative for the Miami component. I actually served 4 years as your College of Fellow representative for the state of Florida. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions, any advice, anything that I can do to help. Unfortunately, and I took out the slide because sometimes the statistics depress me. Florida is a large state. There's the AIA componentry are divided by regions, and we are one of the 8 large states in the whole country. And yet our numbers of submittals and elevations is dismal, to use a polite word. We have, at best 11 or 12 submittals. And if we get 3 or 4 to be elevated that year, I'm jumping with joy. And if I tell you California, their reception for LA was for 25 of them had elevated, and New York City is the same. Those states are machines, and it's not because they have more qualified people. It is that I think more of them submit. We have very good people in our component in the whole state, and it's become part of my mission to encourage people to submit to the college for recognition of your efforts. This isn't just about elevating architecture and design, but this is recognizing all you as an individual do. We all sacrifice ourselves for our passion, which is architecture and design and the AIA, and this is a way to validate those efforts that doesn't really compare to any other award that you may get. In my opinion, but obviously I drank from the Kool-Aid, so I'm trying to share it with everybody as well. So now I want to open it to our three panelists. We have Nati Soto and Marilys Nepomechie from Miami, and Joyce Owens, and if they could share their little lovely faces so we can see them. And this is obviously a committee. As you can tell, the panelists and the moderator are all women, so this is really part of the Women in Architecture committee that we wanted to share our experiences and our path to get there. So I have asked each of them to sort of answer basic questions about what year they were elevated, where was it, and it's funny when you always meet us, they're always going, oh, I got elevated in whatever city it was, and you're like, ooh, that's a great location. That AIA is always looking for iconic locations for the College of Fellow Elevation Award, because again, it's a ceremony that means a lot to everybody. So everybody's always getting excited. Ooh, that's a great city. That was a great location. If you were unlucky or lucky to go in San Antonio, everybody remembers that they died in heat because it was outside in the middle of June. So I've asked each of them to sort of give us a little bit about what year they were elevated, what was their objective, and who or what prompted them to decide to pursue this, because it's not an impossible task, but it's very much self-perspective. You got to look at what you did. Is it important? Did it make an impact? And it can be daunting. It can be scary. It can be downright mind-boggling, but it's well worth it, as you can see by all of us who are here at the table. So I'm going to start with Nati and have her go.
Okay, so I was elevated in 2015 in Atlanta, Georgia, and the ceremony was in the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Actually, it was not in the old church, it was in the new church, so it could fit everybody. But it was a very, very powerful place. It's a beautiful place. If you've never been there, I encourage you to visit it as well. I was also very fortunate that there's always a group of fellows that escorts the new fellows to the stage to receive their medal and to shake the hand of the chancellor, etc. So I was very fortunate that Mickey Jacob, who was AIA Florida's president and also AIA national president, so he asked me, "Can I escort you to the stage?" And I like, of course, you know, he's a great friend, so that was very special. And that Elizabeth Schuster was the president of the institute, the national president of the institute. So she was able to put the medal over my head. It was a very special moment. My objective was number 3, led the institute. So how I got to that point is for many years I had been involved off and on with AIA Miami, even before I had my kids, and then I had my kids and took a little break there and did the PTA thing. But I was always drawn back to service, to make a difference basically in our association and in the world of architecture, because I really didn't like people saying how terrible it was to be an architect, how difficult it was, that it wasn't appreciated, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe that. I don't believe that in 1 minute, and I refuse to buy into it. So I tried to understand why these people said that and were saying that, and how I could effect a change to make that their reality different. And one of the things that I saw was that there were not a lot of women involved in leadership at AIA Miami. Lourdes was the second AIA Miami president. I was the third. The first one had been Marion Manley, like, I don't know how many years ago, Lourdes?
1941.
Yeah, so 60 years before, almost 60 years before. And it took a long time for that, the presence and the visibility of women to make it in the AIA realm. And I thought that was critical. As far as my profession, this is to me the association that represents architects, and women were not participating because they in either in reality or in their minds were not welcome. So I started doing some things about that. And one of the things that other than running for president, obviously, and serving as president of Miami, I was fortunate to also serve as a representative to AIA Florida, for a representative of the Miami chapter. So that opened up a whole new world as well. And I realized that representation, of that equity, was not visible in AIA Florida as well. So for many years, I did some things, and I was very fortunate to go to serve as a vice president, and to at the same time I was vice president of AIA Florida. I also served on the National Diversity and Inclusion Council, which is a committee that focuses on the work of trying to make our profession reflect what our society is, because the numbers are just not there. When I was exposed to the data of participation, the women's data was not very significant, and the Black architects, Black woman architects, and even Hispanic architects nationally, the numbers are just not there as far as registered architects and members of the AIA. So I took that that charge. Okay, what can I do in Florida? What can I do more in Miami? What can I do in Florida? And Lourdes and I had already met about her exposure to the situation, and that's how we launched AIA Miami Women in Architecture group. I took it to the state, and we established a task force that the charge was basically to make it clear to the different committees that this was an issue, and how can we do our work so that we're not forcing the situation, but that we present opportunities where women were more visible. So that was the main work, part of our national work through the Diversity Council. Lourdes is my partner in crime for women in architecture. So I said to her, Lourdes, there's no national toolkit on women in architecture. Nobody knows what to do. Everybody keeps asking me, what kind of things should we do? And we've done these things in Miami. So we put together a toolkit that basically was a guide of what we were doing here, what Orlando was doing, what had been doing throughout the state, plus other areas in the country that had very good programs. And we were able to consolidate that in the documents so that people could use it as a guide to energize the diversity for the women throughout the U.S. And I think it's been successful. We've seen the numbers go up, and they're not going up very quickly. But that was basically my point: is to basically make this the women in architecture a visible group of our profession and a viable group of our profession, and to create a mentorship environment throughout the U.S. as I could assist in that. So that's my story. What else did I answer any questions? Yeah, so I don't want to take up the whole time, but you know, again, I encourage anybody that's on this call to really focus on what they're passionate about, because passion is power, and that's exactly what you need to follow, and take it as far as you can, take it all over, and do your thing.
Thank you, Nati. How about you, Joyce? Oh, you're still on mute.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Okay, so I was elevated in 2008, and that was in New York
18.
City. 2018, and that was in New York City. So what was my object was, I thought, number 2. And so I prepared my entire submission based on object number 2. I have a bit of a mixed background. I lived in both, I lived in the UK, I lived in London for 15 years, and which still made a big contribution to my submission. So it's not like I had to ignore the fact that I lived in the UK for 15 years. It was a big portion of my submission. And then I only had lived in, I'd only been a member of the AIA for 10 years. And so I was like exactly to the day, the 10 years, because you have to be a member in good standing for 10 years. So that I thought, so I had a bit of a mixed bag. So I took a lot of advice. I talked to a lot of people, including one of the ex-jury members who advised me that that's where I should be. I should be in object number 2. And so I did that. And sure enough, after 4 months, I got a call out of the blue, and they said, how would you feel if we changed your object to 5? And I didn't even bother reading it. I said, yeah, whatever it takes, I don't mind. So that's what they did. They graciously decided, the jury decided that whatever I had done was good enough to get me through, but they needed to change my object. So I went back and I read the object after I agreed, and I didn't really understand, but whatever, who cares? I made it to New York, and that was important. So I think the reason my submission was in 2017, and I was actually the AIA Florida president that year. So one of the things you probably don't want to do is be AIA Florida president or in any great leadership role that year and try to do your fellowship the same year, because it was a lot to take on. And but the reason I took the opportunity was because Lourdes was she was one of our fellowship leaders at the state level, and she was telling a group of us that, you know, you really need to think about where you're going to get your fellowship, because it's fun if you go to a great place and have a great location to receive your fellowship. And so I kept thinking New York and St. Patrick's Cathedral. I said, wow, that sounds great. And then I thought, oh, but there's no way I'll ever do this year. So I'll wait till the next year. And then she said, but the next year is going to be in Las Vegas. And I just thought, that is not where I want to get my fellowship. I really want to be in New York, in St. Patrick. So as dumb as that may sound, that was the motivation for doing it, on top of being, you know, in a leadership role at the same time, which was a little crazy, but it's okay. It worked, and I did manage to get through the first time, which was fantastic. So why did I get through? I think I had my hand in sort of like all of the objects, and so I myself decided that I would divide my submission into 3 parts, and so I did it as sort of as a design leader, because when I was in London, my practice was very well known, and we had amazing clients, and we were able to do amazing work, and we were in the press almost every week. And so we were on television. We did a lot of kind of stuff at that time, and we were always advocating for good design. So that was kind of, and then when I came here and I started my own practice, it started again, that kind of press and stuff, but it wasn't as strong as it was in London. And so I didn't feel like I could go for the design one, because I didn't feel like I had a body of work in the US that was as good as what I had been doing in the UK. And so I thought I'd have to wait a bit longer to be able to do that. And then the second part was public leader. And so because when I came back from the UK, I was very disappointed in sort of the role of architects in our community and how I felt that architects had been taken a second place to a lot of the other professions or professionals in the construction industry. So I kind of felt that while I'd been away for those 15 years, architects weren't as important as they had been at one point. And I also knew that when I was in England, I was really treated like a professional. And so if I was hired, I was respected, I was listened to, I was paid. I mean, and so when I came here, I didn't feel the same way. And so I really took up the torch of trying to advocate for architects here. And I did that in many different ways. I did it through local exhibitions. I did it through kind of a lot of volunteer work with other architectural organizations, trying to help them to raise, whether it be historical architecture or whatever. And then most importantly, I started to write a column in my community about architecture. So I became the kind of local architectural critic and a reporter in my paper, which eventually, so it was for a local paper, which was actually owned by Gannett paper. And so sometimes Gannett would take my articles, I wrote a column actually, and they would take those columns and they would syndicate my columns, because sometimes they were very specific to this place and sometimes they were kind of more broad and more general subjects. So that was kind of fun. And then eventually that led me to starting to write. I actually did get hired by Gannett then, and I started to write for their 10 best column. So I did a number of those as well, which was a national thing. So that kind of took me to a national stage, which I think that the jury really liked, that I was able to write for a national organization like that. And it was online, and it remains online today. And so that was, I think, reaching out to an audience that gave them a good example of how I reached beyond, my small town here in Southwest Florida. Because I am not from a bigger city. I am from Southwest Florida, and I'm down here. And it's a very different world trying to get your fellowship here than trying to get it from, a bigger city where you can have a bigger impact. And then the third part was through Institute Leader. And so as soon as I came back from Europe, I did get involved with the AIA immediately. And I started doing what we all do. We volunteer a little bit, we volunteer a little more, we get put on the board, we become local chapter president. And then I think my message was very strong, because I always talked about communicating and how important it was for us as architects to communicate. So I held like seminars on dealing with local journalists and stuff like that, then explaining how they're desperate to talk to us and we never bother to get in touch with them. So that became my theme for my for running for president for AIA Florida, and it seemed to work, and I was elected president and became the 2017 president. So I think, just through those three different things, it kind of put me in a lot of different categories, and maybe I didn't feel I was strong enough in any of those. And so that's why they put me in the bucket of Object 5 in the end, because I was a lot of things. And so whatever it was, I was happy to do that. so that was good. Yeah. And I think that, there are a couple lessons to be learned about doing your fellowship as well. Is that you really have to take advice from other fellows. And that doesn't mean just listening to us like a webinar like this. You really want to sit down with another fellow and ask them, how did they do it? Look through their submissions, talk to them about how they presented it and so on. And as well as picking a very strong sponsor, which Lourdes mentioned. So of course, Lourdes said, pick a very strong sponsor. And so I picked Lourdes because Lourdes is the most strong sponsor. So she was a fabulous sponsor, and she told me like it was. And I did my first submission and she ripped it apart. And I had to start it all over again. And it wasn't so much the content, it was just the way it was all presented and put together. And she really said, look, you have a lot to say and you need to say it right at the beginning. It needs to be very clear, and then you support what you say. And so her advice was really, really good. And so it was worth taking the time to redo it. So yeah, and what are you waiting for? Just do it. I mean,
Yep.
there's no reason to wait. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Joyce. And Marilys, who's actually been in the college longer than all three of us prior. So she's our more experienced fellow of the chapter.
I don't know about that, but thank you for the invitation to speak and to join you. It's an honor to be in the company of so many accomplished colleagues. So I am the only full-time educator in this group, so it's a slightly different perspective on the enterprise. I could say that, Lourdes, I've been following your leadership of this group of women and men as they navigate fellowship across the state of Florida. I agree with you that we should be a lot better about getting more of our colleagues recognized at the national level. And I applaud you for what you've been doing. I think that it's incredibly important. I was looking through my files in preparation for speaking today, and I noticed that I wrote for you when you went up for fellowship a while back. It was an honor then and continues to be one now. So I should, I guess, begin by saying that the object that they asked you not to do, Joyce, is the one where I applied. I'm a full-time educator as well as an architect. And I was elevated to fellowship in 2005. The investiture was in Las Vegas, which somebody said was a really bad idea. I actually never went. And not because I didn't value it, but because it landed at the same time as I promised to be in the Netherlands for a presentation and an exhibition that we were doing. So I missed my investiture, but I have been a very happy member of the college for many, many years. I did the application 15 years into licensure. I checked. And so just to get a sense of how long you should wait, I think you shouldn't wait at all, but you should have some body of work that you can share with the Institute. And for me, that was the number that worked. I was encouraged by academic and professional colleagues around the country and at Florida International University, where I teach, to apply. I was nominated by a colleague and put together a package. My package was an academics package. So it was fairly varied. I have a practice and it is an active one, but a small one. So the package included design awards from my practice at local, regional, national, and international levels. As an academic, giving lectures and doing public speaking is pretty much part of your bread and butter. So it included lectures, publications. Again, if you don't do those, you don't last in the academy. So they were part of my bread and butter. And I was able to document those. And the same thing was true for exhibitions and grants and a range of service. For me, again, this is as an educator speaking, the application to fellowship became part of the way that I made a case to my institution that my work was valued outside the academy. And so it became part of my tenure package. And if there are other educators in the room, in the virtual room, and you want to talk about that, I'm more than happy to do that. But I wanted to say that in retrospect, it's fellowship has, besides being an honor, for which I'm very grateful, it's been a way to open doors and to give me opportunities to do some good. Obviously, as you have all said before, it raises the profile of women and minorities in the profession. We remain woefully underrepresented this many years into this collective enterprise, and we obviously need to do more. But fellowship gives you credibility and it gives you access in ways that not having fellowship doesn't. And it gives you an opportunity to affect change and to do some good. In my role as educator, I get to mentor students, women and minorities in particular, but all students to enter the profession and to get licensed and to become a part of the licensed practice of what we do. It's probably not news to anyone, but at this point, the majority of our student body is female. Clearly, that's not what happens after they leave the academy and they enter the profession. We lose women at almost every level of service. So having powerful mentors, people who remain friends and advisors for life, is something that is helpful, and I'm more than happy. I'm honored to step into that role. I've been able to work with colleagues at the AIA and through the AIA for a range of capacities. I've been honored to be offered leadership in the Association for Collegiate Schools of Architecture, the ACSA, which is the kind of analog to AIA, but for education. I was president of ACSA. I'm about to become national president of the NAAB, which is the National Architectural Accreditation Board, comprised of AIA and NCARB and ACSA and AIAS, and a group of engaged people from all parts of the profession who are interested in having a voice in how we educate architects and what knowledge base they need to have in order to really succeed in the profession. On behalf of AIA now, I am serving as co-director of the Education Commission of the International Union of Architects. They're based in Paris. My co-director is based in Cairo. And again, it's an opportunity that would not have been possible without fellowship. I think that look at the fellowship process as something that's valuable in and of itself, but something also that opens doors to do more. And for those of us who are interested in doing everything that Lourdes and Nati and Joyce have all talked about, which is mentor and help and assist and promote, it is an exceptional vehicle. And I'm very happy to be here to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilys. We have a few minutes for questions, so if you would like to put them in the chat, to everyone, and we'll be happy to answer. But as I said, we're here to help. We're here to encourage, and I think Marilys put it in correctly. It's not just an accomplishment for us to have gotten it, and it's a validation of your efforts, but it does really open doors to a whole series of opportunities to continue your passion, whichever passion that happens to be. Not to say that you can't get those opportunities without the fellowship, but it opens another door that is not perhaps as easily open otherwise, or just the contacts. It is really about who you get to meet. So I am very, I really, as I said many times, we have many very talented people in architecture here in Florida, and we have to get more of us elevated to the College of Fellows, because they're not going to give it to you. They don't know who you are. So you need to toot your horn. And I'm sure all the panelists will agree with me that after you finish with this, you're like, wow, I really don't believe anything I wrote. It sounds really good, but wow, I did all those things. There must be something wrong. It's a really wonderful process. It's also a very scary process. And I think sometimes people are just scared. They just think that it's not going to happen, or that they don't know, they haven't done enough. And I hear that so many times, and I'll ask the question of all three of them: have you done enough or not? And Nati's a great manipulator, as I like to call her, a master viewer of how do you get there. So maybe she can, you're on mute, Nati.
Yeah, Lourdes calls me a master manipulator because it's an issue. And the reason that I say that, some people don't think the word manipulative is a very good term, and it's not. But the idea is that you have a passion and you want to, as Marilys said, you want to maximize the exposure and the impact of what you can do for that particular subject, and you know what that is. It's in your heart. So this process not only makes it clearer how to do that path through the outreach of the other fellows that can give you advice on how to make that impact in the national realm. But it also gives you personally as an opportunity to be connected with others that you never would have met unless you were in this process or unless you were passionately involved in your particular subject. Because I think a lot of us do a lot of things that are volunteer based that we do, whether or not it's focused. I mean, I worked with FAIA. I've served on that committee for years, and I worked on the advocacy committees, and I brought some things from national to Miami, some national symposiums, like for the healthcare architects and the urban development symposium that we had many years ago. And I worked on the convention when it was in Miami in 2010 and in the committees. It gives you the process gives you a clear way of focusing those efforts so that you focus on one particular thing and you maximize it. And the network of fellows that are available to help you focus on that and give you guidance and obviously give you critique at every step of the way. That's the most important thing in the process, is to accept feedback. Some of it may be very harsh, depending on who you ask for that feedback. Lourdes was also my sponsor, so I also experienced that, but I also experienced it from our dear friend Henry Alexander, who passed away a few years ago, and he gave me some critiques on my submission that he would not give. He didn't give anybody critiques, but he was kind enough to do that in the late part of his life, that I think made a huge difference. And those connections that you make with these people and this harsh criticism really helps you focus your life and your career and your passion to create what you need to create and to present it forward. So I encourage anybody and everybody that wants to submit for this to really use these resources. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be like, oh, they don't know anything. I'm just gonna do it myself. Or even worse, don't give it to your marketing person, because that does not work. And it's very sad that I've seen people that are so worthy and have so much that they've contributed nationally that are not getting elevated because they are not putting in the personal time to tell their story. They're giving it to the marketing people. So those are my couple of things of advice that I hope that I can encourage you all to follow.
One of our attendees wanted to know how long it took us to put in the application, since this, as you said, such a personal process. I know it took me not long enough because I did it quickly, so I'm not a good person to answer the question. Perhaps the other participants have a more appropriate answer. Joyce, how long did it take you to put yours together?
Yeah, it took me, I probably did it over the course of 2 months. And then
You're like me.
I did offer the services of my intern that summer to help me. So that was not about the personal side of it. The personal side was all from me, but graphically asking for assistance made a big difference. So a lot of that time was, I had the intern help me, but it was interesting because Lourdes had told me very close to the deadline that I needed to redo it. And so thank God for her and Kay and Irma, because I was stuck with my family for 3 full days and nights. And that's what I did day and night. I just did it in those few days. So I may not have gotten through it, but I did have a little bonus time. So that was useful. Yeah.
How about you, Marilys?
I actually, it's been a long time, so I don't remember quite as long. I can tell you that as an academic, we spend a lot of time putting materials together about what we do, because it's just, again, it's part of our process. Not so much a process of professional life, at least not in the same way. But I can't agree more with what Nati said, that you really, this is a personal process, and that it really needs your focus and your energy and your time, so that it's yours and it's not generic to the firm, and it's not about something other than the passion that you bring to the work that you're performing.
Yeah, I think it took me, as I said, like Joyce, maybe 2 months. And I remember my sponsor saying, well, look at it this way. If you're not done on time, you have a head start for the following year. And I thought, okay, well, you know, not that I want to do that, but you always hear people saying it's going to take a long time and years. And I think part of that came back when it was more paper driven. When Marilys did, and it was still a printed version. Now that it's online and it's a digital format, I think they've limited the number of pages. And I'm not saying it's easier or harder. I think you're bound by the number of pages. And I think back in the olden times, or many, and it's only been digital for maybe 6 years, 8 years. So it hasn't even been digital that long. I think you could really, by your putting all the samples, before you know it, you had a book that was this big, and it took you a long time to get a book this big. But don't wait, just do it. Ask questions, because, you know, that's what we're here for. And as Nati says, you know, the fellows throughout the state are more than happy to, we have a whole group of fellows who don't know you, and we make a point of sending them to them so that they can, you know, objectively critique it. Somebody has a question about the work you would include in the application. Do you go far as back as university or professional? You have to pick the work that shows an impact. So it doesn't matter how old or how recent it is, it's the impact. And the influence that you have. And that's kind of the way I'm answering to Artie. Look at what you've accomplished. And it might be something you did 10 years ago, but it really has a strong impact even today. And maybe it was very impactful 10 years ago. It's not as impactful, so it's kind of gets a little mention, you know, so each person's a little bit different. But you want to show impact beyond your circle, your friends, and it's on any capacity. You know, we're all parts of teams, and we're all, you know, as Nati says, you know, you meet somebody from here, and before you know it, you've done all kinds of things that impact the other people. So we have just 1 minute, and I know Cheryl is always wanting us to stay punctual, and everybody's lunch and time is important. So I want to thank Nati and Joyce and Marilys for joining us and sharing your experiences. We could continue to talk about this for hours, but that's not the point. The point is to encourage all of you to just jump in and start doing it. And all else fails, at least start a box or a file in your computer of items that you think could be useful, so that when you decide to put it together, you've collected all this stuff. Back in my day, and Marilys and most of us, we had a little box with things, and now, you know, have files in there. So with that, Colleen, I'll give it back to you with a minute. Look at that.
Thank you, everybody. What wonderful stories. It was great to hear everybody. Please, everyone, check your emails. There's going to be a short survey that we will send out asking you how you like the program. And then also, we're always asking for ideas for town hall meetings or other programs that we can do. And until the end of this year, they're going to have to be virtual. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Lourdes, thank you so much for leading the team. And we want to see you all next week, hopefully next Wednesday at noon for Town Hall 14. And that one's going to be Educating Architects, and it's going to be professors speaking out about post-COVID-19 education. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.